We gather together today as the dear family and friends of Phyllis Rock. As we mourn her loss, must also celebrate the full, rich life she led. Death has taken our beloved Phyllis. Friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence there's lamentation. In their tears there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For her love that united us in life and which death cannot sever. For her companionship which we shared along life's path and which still continues through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of her heart and her mind which brought us joy and happiness and now become a precious heritage of the Spirit. For all these and more, God, we give you our praise. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai natan v'nai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mevarach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people, we're well acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us. Yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave, and there is strength in faith. With Job we say, Adonai natan, God you have given. You gave us a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all it was good and enduring in her life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Proverbs 31. Eshet chayil mi yimsa, v'rhok mitni mikra. A woman of valor who can find. She's more precious than fine pearls. Her husband trusts in her, and so he lacks nothing. She does him good, never harm, all the days of her life. She perceives that her labor is rewarding. Her candle burns on into the night. She reaches out to those in need and extends her hand to the poor. She is clothed in strength and dignity, and she faces the future cheerfully. She speaks with wisdom. The law of kindness is on her lips. Her children rise up and bless her. Her family sings her praises. Many daughters have done valiantly, but you excel them all. A poem entitled My Hereafter. Do not come when I am dead to sit beside a low green mound or bring the first daffodils, because I love them so. For I shall not be there. You cannot find me there. I will look up at you from the eyes of little children. I will bend to meet you in the swaying boughs of bud-thrilled trees and caress you with the passionate sweep of storm-filled winds. I will give you strength in your upward tread of everlasting hills. I will cool your tired body in the flow of the river. I will warm your work-glorified hands with the glow of the winter fire. I will soothe you into forgetfulness, to the drop of the rain on the roof. I will speak to you out of the rhymes of the masters. I will dance with you in the lilt of the violin and make your heart leap with the bursting cadence of the organ. I will flood your soul with the flaming radiance of the sunrise and bring you peace in the tender rose and gold of the after sunset. All these have made me happy. They are part of me, and I shall become a part of them. I'd now like to invite Ezra to come forward to chant the 23rd Psalm.
Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, bino deshe yaritzeni, al mei menuchot yenaleini. Nafshi yeshovev, Nafshi yeshovev, Yancheni v'magale tzedek, Leman shemo. Gam ki elech, begeitz al mavet, lo irara, ki ata imadi, shivtecha, ומשענתך שבטך ומשענתך, המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן, תערוך לפני שולחן, תערוך לפני שולחן, נגד צוררי. דשנת ושמן ראשי, דשנת ושמן ראשי, דשנת ושמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב החסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני, וישבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
The Baal Shem Tov, the Hasidic Rebbe, once observed that there are 3 ways to mourn. The first is with tears, the second is with silence, and the third is with song. When we mourn someone truly beloved, we experience all 3. Tears at first, then silence as our grief settles more deeply, and finally song as we're able to celebrate the memories we hold deep in our hearts. So this is a time for tears as we say our final goodbyes to Phyllis. We'll each remember Phyllis in her own way. Phyllis was a loving mother to Sherry and Everett, Charles of blessed memory and Paula, Noah and Leah, Conrad and Iris, and Cindy and Howard, and all your children, Akiva and Annie, Leora, Ezra, Sarah, Paul, David, Rachel, Leah, Aaron and Susan, Jonathan, Micah, Josh and Megan, Rachel and Mark, Andrew, William, Alexander and Courtney, Ariel, Jared and Shayna. We'll remember Phyllis as a beloved grandmother. Phyllis was an adoring great-grandmother to Carmen, Finn, Benjamin, Hadass, Judah, and Nathan. Phyllis was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, on January 22, 1925, to Belle and Nathan Rosenstein. She was an only child. Phyllis's father became ill with Parkinson's about a year after she was born. Her mother took him to every doctor and rabbi for help and advice. He was hospitalized in New York for many years and passed away when Phyllis was 14. Because her mother was often away, and it was during the Depression, much of Phyllis's childhood was spent with her grandparents, Helen and Martin Bash, and her extended family. Phyllis grew up with her cousins like siblings, and she was very close with her Aunt Hannah, who was close to her age, even traveling along on Hannah's honeymoon with her. Phyllis's grandmother made a beautiful Shabbat dinner every Friday night for the whole family, and they were very active in their synagogue, Temple Israel. After Phyllis graduated high school, her mother was fixed up with Jacob Lucky, and they married, and Phyllis and her mother moved to Akron. Jacob never had children of his own, and he adopted Phyllis. They were very close. For entertainment at that time, the young people went out dancing. Phyllis was a wonderful dancer. She was tall and beautiful. One night when she went out dancing with her cousin, she met Kenneth Kohler, and they wanted to get married right away before he went off to the war. The synagogue members pooled their rations to make their wedding at the synagogue on November 24th, 1944. He went off to the service, and she joined him in Alamogordo, New Mexico. When he had to leave for war, Phyllis came back to Akron. Kenneth was away for 3 years, but when he returned, they had 5 children in 7 years. but then they officially divorced in 1955. At 29 years old, Phyllis found herself a single mother with 5 children. But Phyllis was a woman ahead of her time. She figured out how to navigate life. At home, Phyllis was a logistical general. She worked for a diaper service when the kids were little to get diapers. They did not have a lot of financial resources, but the kids were always clean, well-dressed, and well-fed. Phyllis's parents helped to provide. Phyllis knew intuitively about healthy food. Every night they sat down to a family dinner with a protein and a vegetable. The plate had to be colorful, just like nutritionists teach today. Phyllis got everyone to Hebrew school at the Jewish Center, baseball practice, and to their newspaper routes, and somehow got 3 loads of laundry, the ironing, and cooking done every day. The children got small allowances and had responsibilities around the house. Every Friday night, Phyllis made Shabbat dinner and lit the candles. They passed around the J&F box, and everyone put in a penny or a nickel. Phyllis taught her children, whatever you have, you need to share. She passed down her strong sense of social responsibility to all her children. Phyllis decided to go to college, and it became a family endeavor. The kids all helped out, pulling money together to buy her credit hours, pitching in around the house, and helping her with her homework. When she graduated, it made the front page of the Akron Beacon Journal with the headline, "Kids Help Put Mother Through College." Phyllis went to single events on the weekend. She was very beautiful, as I mentioned, and had lots of suitors. But the kids terrorized her dates until they didn't come back. At the age of 39, Phyllis met Richard at a dance. They dated for 4 years. She made him propose a few times because she kept pushing him away, but he kept coming back. He was head over heels for Phyllis. They finally got married when only 2 kids were still at home. They had a great love affair, sharing 44 wonderful years together, always dressing in matching colors and holding hands. Richard was a jokester and made Phyllis laugh. He showered her with attention and did things for her that nobody had done for her before. Richard bought a gas station and then a Dairy Queen, and Phyllis worked right by his side. They bought a motorhome and went all over the country. Phyllis and Richard showed up for all the kids' births in the motorhome with her famous gravlocks for all the brisses. And many of her grandchildren came home from the hospital in that motorhome. Phyllis liked to knit, and all 17 of her grandchildren got sweaters and hats when they were born. Phyllis and Richard loved taking all the grandchildren on a trip to Cedar Point each year. They made it a 2-day adventure in the motorhome, and they were sure to buy the gate picture each year. Phyllis and Richard also enjoyed going to Florida. It was very difficult for Phyllis when Richard died 6 years ago. It was as if she had lost a part of herself. That is when I personally got to know Phyllis. Whenever I would see her at services, I would greet her during the Hakafah, the Torah procession, and she would take both of my hands and kiss them. Phyllis was a quintessential lady. Recently, when I visited her in the hospital, I stepped out for a second to get a nurse to stop the IV from ringing so I could hear her better. And when I returned, I could see Phyllis was rushing to put on lipstick, so she was dressed for my visit. Phyllis was always happy to see people and appreciative of a kind word or deed. Family was absolutely the most important thing to Phyllis. She was so proud of her children and grandchildren and how successful they all were in life. She passed down her Jewish values and her commitment to community to each one of them. Phyllis's sons and daughters-in-law became children to her. Phyllis was thrilled to attend her grandchildren's brises and baby namings, bar and bat mitzvahs, and even a few weddings. How difficult it was for her when Charles died. She went out to visit him. She woke up early in the morning, got all dressed, and came down to see him, hoping to lift his spirits and demonstrate her devotion to him. Before Phyllis died this week, she was surrounded by her family. She looked at each family member and told them she loved them and said goodbye. And then she pushed them out of her room so she could have a moment. She knew it was the end, and Phyllis wanted to go as she had lived, on her own terms. So today may be a time for tears. We are saddened by the loss of Phyllis, but we learn so much from her, especially how to care for one another. Let these tears serve to strengthen and uphold you as a family. There's a famous story in our tradition about a rabbi who once passed an old woman planting trees. "Old woman," he called, "why are you planting those trees? You'll never live to see them blossom." But the woman replied, "My ancestors planted trees, not for themselves, but for us, that we might enjoy their shade and their fruit. I too do the same for all those who will come after me." Phyllis planted an orchard for each one of us, an orchard filled with devotion and with love, and these will always be here for us. We must be grateful that we were able to share in her life. Tomorrow there'll be fewer tears, more silence. As the Baal Shem Tov noted, it will be a time for pondering, a time for contemplation. Phyllis will become a greater part of our characters and our beings as we integrate the memories and the values she taught us into our own selves. But finally, there'll come a time for song. The time will come when we can celebrate Phyllis. We recall all that we learned from her and how she touched each of our lives. May she rest in peace. Zecher Siracha Livracha. May the memory of Phyllis Rock be a blessing. Amen. I'd now like to invite a number of Phyllis's children and grandchildren will speak. And first, I think we'll start with Sherry. Sherry will come forward, and then we're going to hear from Conrad and Cindy, and then the grandchildren will come forward.
Our mother was very blessed in so many ways. She had a long life. She was able to be healthy and independent until the last few months. She had a loving family that surrounded her and cared for her, especially our sister Cindy, who became her special person after her husband Richard died. She got to travel and have many adventures. She had a home that she loved, and she didn't lose her ability to walk, to see without glasses, to hear without aids, and she had all of her teeth, which she used to good advantage. But most of all, she had the blessing of a good name. Everyone she met on her life's journey remembered her fondly, as we are hearing from everyone, from her first cousins to the people she interacted with at the senior center and the grocery store. To paraphrase the poet Zelda, each of us has a name we are given and a name we make for ourselves. Our mom's Hebrew name was Tzipporah Ruth. Tzipporah and Ruth in the Bible were outsiders who ended up marrying important men. Tzipporah was the daughter of a Midianite priest who married Moses, and Ruth was a Moabite woman who married Boaz and became the ancestor of King David and thus the founder of the royal line of Israel. Our mother's life wasn't glamorous like that at all, but their lives resembled hers in other ways. Tzipporah means bird. Our mother loved birds, and she had a beautiful singing voice. When we were young, she had a bird feeder in the backyard, and we watched out for the cardinals out the kitchen window. In her last years, she loved the birds in the rehab facilities that she was in, and the birds outside the windows of my house when she came to visit, and outside her house as she sat in her kitchen. The biblical Tzipporah was a strong and independent woman. She took decisive steps when need be, and she had a strong character, and so did our mom. The name Ruth has two possible derivations. It can come from the Hebrew re'ut, meaning friend or companion, or it can come from the word ra'ot, means something worth seeing. She was just 22 when I was born, and I was fortunate to have her as my companion through almost 71 years of my life. When I was younger, she often wanted me to be her friend and helper and someone to talk to. But the older we got, the more she grew into the role of my mother. A few weeks ago, I got a call that she was in the hospital. And I called my sister at 2 a.m. to see if she was okay. Cindy was sitting next to Mom, and when Mom heard that I was on the phone, she wanted to know why I was calling so late. Is everything all right? My mother to the end. Mom was a sight to behold, beautiful and elegant always. The biblical Ruth was left childless and with little support when her husband died. Our mom was left with 5 children and little support when she and my father separated. She was only 29. Like Ruth, she didn't seek pity. She maintained a poise and serenity, like the biblical Ruth. She came from a line of very strong women, and she learned to move on. She created a home for us, even allowed a homeless dog we named Laddie to join our family. That was just for Noah. Organized our household and worked hard from morning to late at night caring for us. Our family may not be the beginning of a royal line, but she raised 5 children to be good human beings, to care deeply about our Judaism, and to understand the importance of family. She got furious at me for not defending my brother on the playground. You stick up for your brother no matter what, she taught me. Blood is thicker than water. All for one and one for all. Together, we could surmount all the myriad of challenges we faced growing up. Both she and my grandmother knew how to put the past behind them, and either they were in denial, or more likely they were optimists. They believed in a better future, that there were rainbows ahead if you could just keep going. Every neighborhood has a mom that all the kids like to hang out with. In our neighborhood, that was our mom. Her house had few constraints, no plastic on the furniture, for example, and she had a listening ear without judgment for our friends. She taught us every practical thing we needed to know to be adults. And when I handed her my first baby with a, "You know how to do this," she handed him right back and told me I'd be fine. That I was the mother now. She was my role model. Because we were only 22 years apart, I knew that I always walked in her footsteps. She made an effort to spend private time with each of us, every day and on special occasions. Every night she would sit in the hall and sing us lullabies, so all of us could hear them, and then she would go from bed to bed, talking with each of us about our day and kissing us each good night. She took me out with her to a fancy dinner and a play when I was a teen, just the 2 of us. I think everyone got a turn to do something like that with her. She and I shared long talks at night, sometimes about serious topics, and sometimes we just laughed so hard we cried. She loved buying me beautiful dresses when I was a teenager. She had had beautiful dresses when she was that age, and she loved to sit and brush my hair. I loved to watch her get dolled up in beautiful clothes and amazing hats and makeup and perfume and long red nails as she sat at the dressing table in her room. She was tall and thin and young and beautiful my whole childhood. We clashed a lot when I was in my later teens and 20s. She did not understand me that lived in the 60s. Few parents did, but she was always there for me. She came to Israel when I was there for the year. She told me truths about my boyfriends that I didn't want to hear, but her words resonated with me nonetheless. She got on a plane to Boston in 1 hour when I called her up in tears, despondent over a relationship gone wrong. She taught me girls could do anything boys could. She was my biggest fan, all of our biggest fans. She believed in us and trusted us. She was always very proud of us and our accomplishments. We could see how difficult her life was, but throughout all that, she was what they say in Hebrew, an ohev yamim, someone who loved every day of her life and found joy in things large and small. She was a survivor, and she taught us to be survivors too through her example. In the end, her hard work paid off with a very happy ever-after love match with her beloved Richard and a lot of nachas from her children. I wrote her poems for Mother's Day and her birthday throughout her life. Lucky for you, I'm not going to bring up the ones I wrote when I was 8 and 9 years old. That are not very good. I want to end with an excerpt from a poem I wrote her for her 70th birthday. She liked this poem and framed it and had it on her wall. I thought of it today because I'm the age she was then. My world seemed full of mystery, so scary and unexplainable. The things I wished to do seemed impossible and unattainable. But you patiently informed me that magic was explainable. The goals in life were possible, and all things were attainable, that all boundaries were crossable, that all people could be friends, that all stormy weather's passable, because there are rainbows at the ends. Your lessons served me well in life. They helped me live and grow. So I taught them to your grandkids too. And I thought you'd like to know. That's what's meant when we pray from one generation to another. It's passing on the wisdom that we learned from our own mother. It's not the years that matter or the number of your days, but the fact that people love you and your children bless your ways. I am so grateful for all that my beautiful, caring, loving, strong, loyal mother did for me and for all of us, for her children and her grandchildren. I am so grateful for all the many rainbows that she found. Mom, you are gone from this world now, but you will forever be in our hearts. I love you.
Not sure if I can get through this, but you'll understand. My mom could sum up situations and would easily express her opinions and evaluation of a situation. Often when I might express regret of what I did or did not do, she would use the phrase, coulda, woulda, shoulda. To remind me that having regrets was not productive, and instead I should focus on self-improvement and learning from my mistakes. My mom could also sometimes be precipient, knowing how to prepare for an unknowing situation. One time, she combined this trait with her trait of being a Jewish mother with regard to food. I was packing to go to Israel for 5 months, and I had this big duffel bag. She insisted that I stuff a cake mix box into to the duffel bag in the 1-inch space that was available. As it turned out, I used the mix 10 months later to make myself a birthday cake. My mom was also determined, headstrong, and when she needed to be, she powered through situations. She passed that trait on to me by example. As with many traits, it could be a double-edged sword with advantages and disadvantages. However, it allowed her to overcome obstacles and be hopeful in spite of challenges and troubles that could be major. It also allowed her to live a wonderful life where she accomplished her main life goals of raising her children and having a good time. For the past several years, I was privileged to talk to her every day by phone. She would often say, "I'm doing the best I can." I knew that to some extent she was powering through, and she gave the message that she expected the same of me. Being hopeful was the only way for her.
My mom was always a mother. She would always stroke my hair to get it out of my eyes. She couldn't stand it. She would always stroke my hair to get it out of my eyes. She always wanted me to look nice and take care of myself. My mother always put lipstick on perfectly, even without a mirror. She told me to wear lipstick too, because it would make me feel better. She often told me that I took care of my kids and her. It was time I took care of myself too. She asked me if I ate and always offered me food. She called me often several times a day. And even when I was at her house or at the hospital or wherever else and I left her, she'd call me 20 minutes later to make sure I got home okay. She was there for me whenever I needed her, for an extra set of hands or eyes or moral support, or just to share her opinions with me. When I needed help with my babies, she was there. She always could tell when something was bothering me. She could see it in my eyes, and she wanted to comfort me. Even though I'm in my 60s, she never, ever stopped mothering me. More than that, she was a friend and a confidant. As Sherry said, I was her person. She trusted me. I will always cherish our Shabbat dinners, making challah and banana bread with her, and seeing the joy and pride she had on her face when she did things that defied her age. She taught me to be the person that I am and she will continue teaching me. I will always hear her voice, and she will be with me always. I'll miss her.
Thank you all for your beautiful, meaningful words. And now we're going to call on the grandchildren. I think Ariel's going to, I was going to say, okay, we're in age order. They know where to come up. So, grandchildren.
There's a lot of this, so this may take a while. So I'm the first of her grandchildren, and I'm the first one to speak, and that means I'm also the first of the grandchildren to mention our grandparents' motorhome, which you've heard of from the rabbi already. It's odd to say, but almost all of the best memories I have of spending time with her happen in and around that sort of giant Twinkie of a vehicle that's still in their driveway. They drove to my birth and basically every other family event that they could for the rest of all of our lives. We spent many summers driving around America with her. The memory that came to mind today, of all memories, was the summer that we drove from Boston to Cleveland by way of Canada and Niagara Falls, sleeping in hotel parking lots as we went. That was the summer that Exxon very foolishly offered a commemorative giveaway of Pepsi tie-in glasses. I think you got a free glass for every 10 or 15 gallons of gas, which made a ton of sense if you were just driving a car. But they made the horrible mistake of not reckoning with the tank of my grandparents' motorhome because it was huge and it got terrible mileage. So by the end of the trip, we had a wonderful experience with our grandmother, and we also had about 35 of these commemorative glasses to remember the summer by. And if you come to Shiva at her house today, you'll see that there's a few of those glasses still around in her cabinets. It's a very strange memento, but it reminds me of some wonderful times that we spent with her.
Excuse me. I'm Leora. In the last couple years, Grandma came to our house in Boston for a few weeks each year. Unlike most of my childhood, given all the people here, we did not get to spend a lot of time together then, but we did, just the two of us, when she came to Boston. I'd put on 1940s music, and she'd work on her beautiful pictures. One day I took her to our local Museum of Fine Arts because I thought she'd like the landscapes and the portraits. I was wrong. She loved them. As I wheeled her to each new painting, her eyes got wider, and she kept saying how amazing everything was. It's not very often you get to see childlike wonder in a nonagenarian's eyes. I'm so glad I could give her new experiences in the final days of her life.
And I'm Ezra. Every year on January 22nd, I would call Grandma to wish her a happy birthday. And then, of course, the next day she would call me to wish me a happy birthday. Born 60 years and one day apart, she often said I'd been her birthday gift. I always liked the idea that celebrating my life meant celebrating her life too. And I know that idea will be with me every year, even now that she's gone. But in truth, it's not just me. Whenever any of us celebrate life, we'll be celebrating her life, because we wouldn't have our lives if she had not lived with all her love and pride and her ferocious will to go on. And when I manage to put my ego aside, I know it's not just me, that she considered each and every one of us her gift. I remember when the whole family would gather together, more than once she would turn to me and said, I did that. Like she was surprised. And then she'd say, pretty good. It's great to know that she was satisfied. And pretty good.
Growing up down the street from my grandparents was an amazing gift. My grandma and I were the best of friends. I knew what made her happy, how to calm her down, and what made her smile. We had a special bond that can only be created from a 27-year friendship. We loved to play games like Kings in the Corner. She taught me how to cook her famous potato kugel. We made dinner together and baked her favorite sweets like honey cake, plum cake, and any type of cookie. We went on walks and explored the world through PBS travel shows. We spent afternoons coloring and evenings watching the sunset through her big picture window in her living room. Before I moved and whenever I came home, I would help to tuck her into bed and say goodnight every night, always giving her 3 kisses, the same number Grandpa gave her whenever he kissed her. I called her pretty lady, and she called me darling. When I was away at school, and more recently this past year when I moved, we talked on the phone multiple times a week because spending more than a few days apart was far too much. I'm going to miss talking with my grandma, holding her hand, surprising her when I come home, and seeing her smiling face. I love you, pretty lady. That's Shayna, and I'm Ariel. I'm gonna blow my nose first. When my brother Alexander was about 6 years old, he says 7 or 8, he packed some belongings into a bandana, tied it to a stick, and filled a canteen with water and a peanut butter sandwich. He was running away from home and going to live with Grandma, who lived half a mile away. Alexander didn't make it that day. He wasn't allowed to cross the street on his own. But for me, that moment has always epitomized what Grandma meant to me and to my siblings. She was the person you could go to, no matter what. Grandma was there. I was the first local grandchild, and my grandparents and I were we 3, at Cedar Point, at sleepovers, sitting around playing cards at the house. I'm so lucky that I got to spend so much time with them as I grew up, and later, when I moved back to Cleveland, that I could live with them for 7 months. Then, Grandma made me dinner every night, even when I told her I had plans and wouldn't be home. She invited my friends into the house, and she lit Shabbat candles with them, whether or not they knew what was going on. Not only was I always welcome there, but anyone I loved was loved too. Grandma was so proud of all of us, and especially her 17 grandchildren. She pulled us out like a party trick, and the person on the receiving end was always appropriately surprised. I remember at her 90th birthday, a group of us were playing Cards Against Humanity in the family room. It's a game that's a little blue, and we were all a little bit embarrassed when Grandma came in to watch what we were doing. But the only thing she saw was her family, sitting together and having fun, and she couldn't have been happier. Grandma was strong-willed and determined, clever and fun. She loved us all so much. Her life wasn't always easy, but in my memories of her, she was happy more often than not. Grandpa made her happy. Babies made her happy. So did a good song. She'd often dance to it or sing along. A good meal. She'd lick her plate clean. And a phone call or visit from a loved one. She was delighted every time I came to see her or called to say hello, just because it was me. It's a great feeling to know that someone is excited simply because you're there, and Grandma always made me feel special simply by her joy. I'm going to miss her honey cake and her break-fast eggs, her voice, her hand-holding, and her delight just at being. I'm going to think of her all the time and for so many reasons. And I hope when I grow up, I can still be as excited as she was about solving the puzzle on Wheel of Fortune, taking a walk to the barrier, or hearing from someone I love.
There's more? I thought they were the end. Okay, who's next? That's it, yeah. I thought it was. I know they were Grinch. I knew Shayna and Ariel were going to be the end. Thank you all for your beautiful personal words. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity, from youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again. From health to sickness and back we pray to health again. from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage made stage by stage to life everlasting. Amen. Please rise now for El Malay Rachamim, and we invite Everett to chant the prayer.
El Malay Rachamim Shochein Bameromim Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina B'ma'alot Kedoshim U'Tahorim Kizohar harakia mazhirim et nishmat tzipora Rut bat Naftali uvela shehalcha leolama Bigan Eden tehei menuchata Bigan Eden tehei menuchata Ana Baal harachamim hastireha beseter knafecha liolamim Uhu tzror bitzror achayim it nishmata Adonai hu nachalata V'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava V'nomar Amen.
Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to our beloved Phyllis Rock, known in our tradition as Sephora Ruth Bat Naftali Vebela, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us all say, Amen. Please be seated for a few moments. This concludes our service. We'll proceed from here to Beit Olam Cemetery for burial. Following burial, the family will be receiving visitors at Phyllis's home, 5765 Janet Boulevard in Solon. Today after services, Saturday evening 8:15 to 9:30, and Sunday 1 to 9, and Monday 1 to 7.